action gives us all the results we want, but we're so afraid to take action because we think that the world's going to fall down if we make one choice. But the choice is what you need, right? You know, everything that we try in life, there's a learning circle. You try it and it either works great or you start adapting, right? And usually what happens is that there's somewhere in between. It's not the worst thing, it's not the best thing, but it's a learning piece that you build upon.
Hey kids, and welcome to Designed by Wingnut Social. I'm your host, interior decorator, Darla Jethro Powell. And today we are joined by guest Jason Yarusi, who is going to tell us how to apply his Live 100 mindset to help you grow your interior design business, live a more fulfilled life, a happier life? I think so, with some actionable takeaways that I think is going to change your overwhelm and ways that you're going to approach some of those high-level problems that maybe we're afraid to address, some of those bad habits that we have. Very interesting, very amazing guests. Stay tuned for that. But first, of course, I have to remind you that Designed by Wingnut Social is sponsored by Wingnut Social, an interior design marketing agency for you guys. Interior designers, architects, to the trade vendors, everybody in that home pro milieu. That's all we've done since 2018 as an interior decorator myself. I have the inside scoop on how to successfully market for all levels of interior design firm, from interior decorators to super high-end multi-million-dollar interior design firms. We do it all. We do it the best. Check out wingnutsocial.com to see what we do, how we do it, and how we can work together. That's wingnutsocial.com. All right, kids, before I get into my conversation with Jason Yarusi, you know the drill. Jason is a private fund manager of over $300 million in commercial real estate. Since 2017, his company, Yarusi Holdings, has amassed over 3,000 apartment and commercial real estate units. Jason has built and exited multiple companies, construction, restaurants, a brewery. Ooh, we didn't talk about that. And multiple large apartment communities. He's an avid ultra runner and workout enthusiast. Wingnuts, help me in welcoming Jason Yarusi to the show. Hey there, Jason Yarusi. Welcome to the show. How the hell are you?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
It's good to have you here. I don't think that we've had a real estate investment flipper mindset guest on the show, so I'm really looking forward to the wisdom that you're about to espouse.
Good.
Are you ready?
I'm hitting a lot of buckets, so sure. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of buckets. That's right. So let's just dig right in. So you have a thing that you're famous for, which is called the 100 mindset. I don't know if we have a show long enough to cover 100 things, but I'm sure you're going to correct me here and straighten me out. Let's just dig right in. What is the 100 mindset? And then we'll discuss how it applies to our audience.
You know, life is a rush, right? We're constantly in a rush, and we're constantly feeling like we're out of time. And many times it distracts us from the goals at hand, right? And so if you think about any goal you have that you know seem too big or too fleeting, that you end up dropping off. I mean, you can see this a lot with New Year's resolutions, right? 92% of them fail because there's really no foundation built and there's no patience in there. And we've all been there, right? We've all had those moments where we had something in front of us, we wanted to do something, and then day 2 comes up and we quit, right? And so back in probably 2008 or 2009, I started running a lot. And so I've run, I don't even know, 50 marathons, a lot now to date. And I got to a point where I've heard about ultra marathons, and that's anything longer than a marathon. So a marathon's 26.2 miles. So anything subjectively longer than a marathon will be deemed an ultra marathon. Well, did some 50-mile races and some longer ones, and I came upon running a 100-mile race. And
holy cow!
You think about these where it's just like that thought right there, like, whoa, I'm going to run 100 miles, like can't do it, right? Because that's usually part is that when we have these big goals in front, like our mind's not ready, we're not ready because, well, how the heck do I prepare for this? And what it came to is like when you do a marathon, typically there's like it could be a 6-week plan, a 16-week plan, whatever it is, right? But typically you'll start out slow. Maybe you'll run, 2 miles, then 3 miles, and 4 miles or 5 miles in the first week. And then you'll slowly build. And as you get up to like week 19 or 18 before the marathon, you might run some 20-mile races. Well, I'm thinking about this 100-mile race, and I was like, well, there's no way I'm supposed to run 80 miles, like a couple miles, just like that just can't seem part. So what do I do? And the only thing I thought is that every single day I'm going to run 6 miles regardless. And here I am in New Jersey. I'm going to get up no matter what in the dark every morning, whether, it's a perfect day or it's freezing out, my toe hurts, I'm sick. It just doesn't matter. I'm going to do it. And I started doing that. I did that for weeks. I did that for months and apart. And when I came upon the race today, right, I got into it. And, when you think of it in terms of your goals, we all put the mind on the goal, right? I want to, do anything. I want to, book this big client. I want to, make $1 million. I want to meet that special someone. We forget about the steps you have to take. And so stepping up to that race, if I was thinking, oh, I have to run 100 miles today, I'd be like, oh, I don't think I can do that. Let's just quit now, right? But the goal was, well, what can I do? And it was that, well, let me just run 6 miles to the first aid station and just see what happens. So I ran 6 miles to the first drink station, got there, said, okay. Then I ran another 6 miles to the next one. And I said, okay. And then, it was another 5 miles to the next one. And then lo and behold, I was like, well, this is getting tough. It was like, well, okay, let's just get to the next one. We'll figure it out. So maybe I'm running to the bridge, another 6 miles to the bridge. And then it was another 8 miles, to the tree. And then another 6 miles to the next drink station. And then at that part, oh man, this is really getting tough. Well, you know what? Let's just get to the next spot. And if I want to quit, then I can have that conversation with myself. Okay, well, let's get to the next station. Okay, I'm here at the next drink station. Well, let me run another 6 miles to the bridge. And then lo and behold, what has happened is that I got to the finish line of 100 miles, completing on a series of 6 mile tasks. And when we think about our life and our goals, is that we get so lost in the goal and so lost in the result, we forget about the actual steps we need to take to place. And if you get to a part of a tough spot, all you have to do is take one more step. And then that mark is usually going to give you feedback, whether or not it's right or wrong. Because you take that step, you get typically 3 results, right? Either it's absolutely wrong, you're going in the wrong direction. Okay, well, stop. Well, you don't like it, just don't do it, right? Or it's on the right direction, we'll keep going, go faster, right? Or it's kind of in the right direction, kind of in the wrong direction, and now you can pivot accordingly. And the 100-mile mindset was just to build on belief of just doing steps periodically of taking the actions and focusing on those actions and not in the results, because the actions lead you to those results.
I love that for a couple of things. Well, first of all, I have to say 6 miles, that's a baby step for me, is hella intimidating. I used to run back in the day and that was my daily, but now thinking of doing a 6 mile step, can it be a quarter of a mile?
It could be anything. I actually had someone and they were like, well, I just have to get out and work out. And like I'm going to go run like 5 miles. Like, well, when's the last time you run? They're like 7 years ago. I was like, well, okay, let's put something together that we can do today. It was like, let's walk 5 mailboxes and just walk back. Right. And that was the first day. And then the second day, walk 6 mailboxes and come back, right? Lo and behold, it doesn't sound like a lot, but then a couple weeks go by, a couple months go by, and they're at 3 miles, 4 miles, just because. But usually we come out and like New Year's resolution, people are like, I'm gonna go back to the gym. And then they work out for 3.5 hours the first day in, and then the next day they can't move. They're a corpse and they can't get out of bed. And they're like, oh, I can't do this. And then they try to go back a week later and then they get busy and then it falls off because you didn't set up something that could be repeated as part of your life.
That it sounds like something I would do for sure. And this, and we're going to break this down as to how it applies to your business, of course. But this reminds me of an interview I saw recently with Cynthia Erivo. She was just in Wicked, right? So I'm obsessed with Wicked. And she said she's a runner. She runs 5 or 6 miles a day. And they instruct you when you're running to look kind of just below the horizon, all right? Or whatever that looks like. But she doesn't. She kind of looks down ahead of her feet. And her mindset is one more step. One more step, which is really breaking it down into baby steps. And that impacted me, like what you're saying as well, as far as an analogy. It's like, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So because it looks overwhelming in the big picture, oh, I want to do a podcast or I want to start my interior design business. Oh my gosh, just the thought of that in a bubble can really give you paralysis by analysis. So let's break down this mindset and how it applies to actually running a small business. Most of our audience are small business owners, either interior designers, architects, or what have you. So translate that for me.
So a series of actions creates feedback, which I identify as what you need to do more of and what you need to do less of. And then that creates progress, right? And typically we get lost on the result that we're seeking. And so we don't take the action, right? So if they're on the part of starting the business, right, they're probably standing on the sideline today with, thinking they need to do 1,000,000 things, when in fact they just need to do one thing, right? And there's usually one specific thing that you need to do right now that is going to be the pinnacle moment for you taking the next step. And so can you identify the one thing, right? So if you're in an interior design business, who's going to be your customer, right? Can you label that right there and just pick one? Now, people might say, well, I just don't know who to decide. Well, on that part, decide anyone, right? You have to start somewhere, pick anything, because at least the one thing that's going to happen is that, okay, while I started working with this customer base and I don't like working on customer base. Well, that's almost as important of deciding the right thing as deciding the wrong thing, right? I had people that, we buy a lot of apartment buildings. That's what my business is. But I had friends that sat in the sideline for 2 or 3 years about about, before flipping a home, because they wanted to learn everything about flipping a home. And then finally, mustered up the courage to learn about flipping a home and go try to flip a home. And in the first week, they learned that they don't want to work with contractors. They hate working with contractors, and they never want to do this again. Well, they could have done 50 steps in between from, going, walking a job site from someone else, going to working for a crew if someone else was flipping, or, going, being part of a contractor, but they could have done and saved themselves 3 years by just going and taking one step to be active in the meantime. And so usually action gives us all the results we want, but we're so afraid to take action because we think that the world is going to fall down if we make one choice. But the choice is what you need, right? Everything that we try in life, there's a learning circle, right? There's that circle, that pattern that you try it and it either works great or you start adapting, right? And usually what happens is that there's somewhere in between. It's not the worst thing, it's not the best thing, but it's a learning piece that you build upon.
I can think of something that applies because I do all the sales here for my agency, Wingnut Social, and I'm not the best with sales, and I'm definitely not the best with follow-up. It overwhelms me. We get a lot of sales and my organization is terrible, but I recently made a decision with myself, just follow up with 3 a week. That's it.
Yeah.
3 and see what happens, just to break it down that way instead of looking at my roster of what I have going on there. And that helped tremendously. So I have a question for you.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, please.
What's powerful about that is that you got away from the result, you got to the action. Right. And so you got to the part of just following up with 3 people, right? Where if you get stuck, and usually what happens is that the accountability gets to the point of, oh, I need to make a sale, but you can't find the right time. You can do your best to present the best option for people and to help people, but you can't find the right time when someone's going to commit to the sale. But if you give 3 times a week to reaching out to people, chances are you're going to put yourself in the right position to be in front of someone at the right time. But it's those actions you can track, because you can say, did I make a sale this week? Well, no. Oh, well, I feel like I've lost. But if you said, did I call 3 people or follow up with 3 people? Yes. Well, that's something you can track that gives you positive momentum.
And it did. I actually did get some positive momentum from it. Instead of being afraid of it or overwhelmed by it, just breaking it down in those little steps. So let's say you're an interior designer, you're an architect, and you've run your 6 miles. You're like, oh, this feels pretty good. I think this is going in the right direction. Let me hit 12. You're at 12, but then something's not clicking, right? Something isn't working. As business owners, we're very results and goal driven, right? And we tend to make our businesses about us and our personality. And if we aren't able to hit something or hit a goal, we think less of ourselves or are worried maybe about the optics of what that looks like, right? I want to do 100 miles. If I don't do this, I'm going to be a failure. I shouldn't pivot here because, how do we get around that mindset? If it's okay to change, it's okay to regroup, it's okay to pivot and getting out of that. I have to scale my interior design firm to $5 million. That's the only thing I'll be respected for. It's my only goal, right? Do you follow where I'm going?
I do, and you can think on that as sometimes we set up these false barriers for which we are thinking that someone else is thinking, but, someone says it wisely, is that everybody is too busy thinking about themselves than thinking about you. Right. And so we got to make sure to get really specific with our goals. And I grew up in a family of Italians, right? And one of our businesses at one part, my dad had a family construction business that about 15 years ago, I went out and really helped. And, sometimes we're so stubborn to the result, right? Like it would be that, when kids come in, you get in this, especially with Italians, you get into this argument or this stubbornness of practice. Well, I've done it this way forever. Right. And we were at a fact one time where it was like, my dad was like trying to beat through a wall to get to the result that he's done it the same way. When I was like, well, listen, we could just do it easier by just opening the door, right? And sometimes we miss it because we're so stuck on the result that we miss that we're detracting from our business because we're so stuck in a result that we're not allowing our eyes to be open to about all the possibilities that are in front of us, right? And that, for my business, right, we've brought about 3,500 apartment units. But my business only started to really take hold after the first couple acquisitions when I stopped being in the way of my team. And what that means is that I was a task giver. And so do this, and then they would get done with that. Well, do this, and then they would get done with that, and then do this. And what happened is that I was always having to be busy giving them tasks, but they were not fully brought into the result because they didn't know what the result was. They didn't know what the tasks were going to complete, right? They didn't know the full experience of what I was trying to accomplish because I was just giving them one piece of the puzzle. It was like someone would come to me and I want them to build a puzzle, but I only give them one piece at a time. Right. And they don't know what's the actual goal or what they're actually trying to do. And when I got out of the way and said, I have great people on my team, Let me tell them the result and tell them how I'm looking to accomplish this goal, and then ask for their feedback. What happened is 50% of the time they were involved and they knew exactly what I wanted and they would go and do it. And another 50% of the time they would have a better way to do it and a better way to accomplish it because I now empowered them to say, here's the result I want. I have you in this position here. And when we're looking at our goals, we have to make sure that we're using our goals in the right way, of not just being some broad metric that when you get there, okay, I've gotten there, but as something that I can actually use as part of my business to carry me forward. Because goals are fleeting in a way because life doesn't stop when we hit them. There's always another goal to get into it.
Yeah.
And when we get to that goal, like say it's like, oh, I want to make, $5 million in revenue. Okay, great. Life doesn't stop when you get there. Right. So what does that mean for your business? Like what does your business look like a decade from now, 2 decades from now? What are your real goals today? And usually when you ask yourself that, like, what are your real goals? And then you ask the question that follows it, like, why? Right. And so if the revenue question is because you saw someone else have that, or is it truly your goal? Because if it's not truly your goal, right, then you're going to have a hard time accomplishing it. One that gets said a lot in our business is like, I want to acquire 1,000 units. And you will be like, well, why? Because I want to. And they'd be like, well, why? It's like, because I want to, have it. There's not a real answer behind it. Right. They're just like, just picked an arbitrary number. And sometimes we're just picking arbitrary metrics, especially in today's world because of, social media or just what we see out there. But get back to it. Oh, I want to, make $2 million in revenue because that would give me a certain percent of profit. And that profit would allow me to, be able to cover all my expenses and step outside my business and hire somebody else to run it, which would give me more free time to be able to go out there and do adventures with my family. Okay, so now we have something we're invested in because we know the reason. But usually what gets part is that I want to make $5 million in revenue and have a profit.
That when going back a little bit, when you're talking about being the bottleneck in the process and just giving your team tasks, I'm pretty good at delegating. My team runs the marketing at Wingnut Social, but I do notice that whenever I would get in there and try to throw a wrench in the works or do some on there, things just go to hell. So that's really funny that you said that and that I thought of that at that time. So Jason, can you tell us how this also applies to, right? We all have big goals, to life balance and avoiding burnout, and how to navigate that using this system?
So when you think of it, and we're talking to our goals right now, you want to think of it with the purpose of, right? And so like if it was that you want to make a certain amount of money, or you want to get to a certain weight, or you want to work out for a certain time, right? Well, usually the betterment is that you want to have a better life. And that's usually the ultimate result is that I want my life to be better. Most can say that they want to have a better life, right? So you have to ask yourself, are these actions sustainable that I'm doing today? Because what we usually do is we try to just get to something in such a quick fashion, right? That's why if you think about weight loss is a real easy one. Like I'm going to lose 30 pounds, right? But what happens is someone loses 30 pounds and then in 2 or 3 months, they gain the weight back. It's because they do it so quickly that they haven't thought in their mind and their body, like, who am I that person that shows up when I've lost 30 pounds? Like, how do I show up? Like, how do I react? And when usually they cut out all the calories and they get there and they get stuck and like, well, I guess maybe I can have a couple of these things again. And they just don't know how to react. And usually with our goals, we don't think about who we're going to become. Like, what's that life? Like, okay, great. You've made $5 million in revenue. How do you show up now? Like, what do you do? Do you go and bring on more staff? Do you go and make a difference in the community by giving to charity? Like, what is it that you represent at that level? And it's like having an out-of-body experience to say, okay, here I sit today and here's the values I have, but there I want to be as that person into the future. How does that person show up? Is that person, kind, disciplined, energetic, right? Well, great. That's what that person shows up today. Am I that person right now? Because usually the difference between where you want to be and where you are is that you're not using the disciplines, you're not using the practices of the person you want to be today, but you're expecting a result of that person you want to be without actually doing the steps.
All right, Jason, I know that Live 100 has 3 foundations and 9 principles, right? And you're going to share, I think, just the groundwork of some of that foundation with us. Go ahead, shoot.
Live 100 has 3 foundational blocks, of which is breaking your habits that no longer serve you so you can build the momentum to magnify the life you deserve. And what really made the difference in myself is that, I had to look at what I was doing. And so the 3 principles as part of the break block is being self-aware, and then owning where you are, and then positioning yourself for greatness. So what does that mean, right? Well, being self-aware is, I have a friend who said something that really stuck with me. He said, many times we can't see how we're acting because, we're inside the jar and we can't see the label. And so we look at it and, are we showing up with love, with kindness, with certainty, or are we showing up with like gluttony, greed, hatred, right? Like, how do we show up each day? And if you can look at yourself in the moment, right, when something doesn't go right, or when something does go right, or when, things are in your favor, when things are not in your favor, when it's rainy out or it's snowy out, right? Like, what does your mind do? Like, what are your thoughts? Like, are you that person that's showing up? And it's not to put yourself down, but you have to take the next step and you have to own it. Say, okay, great. I am not showing up in a good way. I'm hateful of, people that are doing success, being successful. I'm really greedy when things are wrong, right? I'm stubborn, right? I'm impractical, right? I'm not helpful in the mind. I'm not being kind in the moment, right? I'm a little crazy. I'm a little out of touch. And then you have to look at it. Okay, well, the goal you want, the goals that you're trying to seek, who is that person and how does that person show up? Are they, are helpful? Are they supportive? Do they offer constructive criticism, right? Well, then there's that difference from where you are today, that you're owning it, right? Not in a bad way, but you're just saying, okay, this is me. Okay, now I realize it, right? Because when you're owning it, you can set your starting line. And then you can position yourself for greatness. You can start to look at the actions and the steps and the thoughts and the patterns of the person you want to be, and then make that connection from A to B. And that simply puts you in this place to be practical with it instead of just saying, well, I need to do better. Okay, fantastic. We all do. But I'm showing up in a bad way. I'm not, being diligent with my practices, and you be self-aware about it. You own it. And then you position yourself for greatness. And that builds your first break block, because once you can do that, you can be truthful with it. You can stop pointing the finger outwards, because what I was doing, right, all of the failures I was having, it was the economy's fault, the president's fault, my parents' fault, the weather's fault, my job's fault. It was everybody's fault but myself. And as soon as I got to the position to say, okay, you know whose fault it is? It's mine. Because I'm the one in charge of me. Well, everything changed. Slowly but surely, things started to pick up, get momentum, make progress. And lo and behold, it got to a lot of momentum.
I love that. And I love the idea and the proposal, right, of breaking habits that don't serve you. I want to dive in a little bit deeper there and ask you your thoughts on this, because sometimes we as human beings have bad habits that subconsciously serve us, right, on a deeper level. Like, we're not going to lose that 30 pounds because there's somewhere in our subconscious that says if you lose 30 pounds, you're going to get unwanted attention and feel unsafe, or you're setting yourself up for sabotage because you have that fear of success with this habit. There's that psychological thing too. So I can consciously sit here and say, okay, I need to change this habit, maybe one less Debbie cake a day to start. There's a 6-mile break. But when you dive a little bit deeper and you deconstruct some of these habits that don't serve us, but serve us in a nefarious subconscious kind of way, do you break that down as well?
The first thing you did, it was important there, is you labeled it, right?
Okay.
Because usually we're doing it, but we're not realizing why we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And so what you just said there is that, I'm holding this weight because if I lose this weight, I'm going to get unwanted attention, and it's going to be, bring something happening. Now, the result with that would be, it gets to a point of, well, where does that thought come from? Right. Mm-hmm. And it could be that at some part we had a bad experience in some way in our life. Right. And then we have to label that. Right. Because usually one bad thing can set the stage for our mind. Right. And hopefully not something horrific, but it could be anything. Like we had a bad breakup, or, we had a business that didn't do well. Right. But you'll have something that didn't go well, but then that represents all the future opportunities ahead of us. Right. It would be, I'll hear from people, well, I'll never do a partnership again because I had a bad partnership. Well, how many partnerships have you had? Well, I've had one. Well, then that's dictated your entire experience with partnerships. How many people do you talk with each day, right? Are you married? Yes. I have this partner. How many people in your life? So now out of all the people you talk to, all the people in your world, right, one bad partnership has now basically set the stage for how the future of any partnership will look like. Is that true? Can that be true to say? Well, no, it can't be, right? There's plenty of opportunity for things to have a different outcome. So when we can label it, we can actually be practical with ourselves to ask ourselves if this is something that's imagined in our mind or a real outcome, right? And usually it's imagined more than it's actually real. But as soon as you can label it and you can break it down and you can put it on paper, right? Because it's powerful to write stuff down, right? Because usually writing it down makes us actually have to think about it, right? And that's why, writing down your goals, right, is very powerful. Or writing down the steps you want to take is very powerful. Or just writing down all the things that are bothering you. You worry every day? Well, great. Write down everything you're worrying about. Because when you put it on the paper, it actually breaks it down. Because, if like today I was like, I'm worried about the weather. I'm worried about my kids having to go to school. I'm worried about having to make the sales client. I'm worried about, having to go have time to work out. Well, that sounds like a lot, man. Like, how are you dealing with it all? But if you just put it down on paper, then you can actually work out a plan to accomplish and make it all easy.
I love it. Jason, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and these principles, at least one principle so far, right? For your Live 100 mindset. I'm sure you're going to tell the audience where they can go to dig into the entirety of that. But now I have to ask you, are you ready for the What Up Wingnut round?
I'm ready.
What would the hashtag on your tombstone be?
Ooh, smile more.
You're pretty quick on your feet. I like it a lot. You're stuck on a deserted island, but you can have your one favorite food forever. What's it going to be?
So it depends, because I guess I had a case and there'll be ways to find steak out there, but I'll say crunchy peanut butter.
That's a very good survival choice. I fully support this decision. High in potassium, essential fatty acids, you're going to survive. I think you're going to do well on this island. Last but not least, please recommend a book that's impacted you in either a professional or personal way.
So one, it just came back around that I looked at again. Just it's always fun to revisit, because it actually speaks to relationships, negotiation. Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Right? There's plenty out there, but that's a fantastic book if you want to learn about just communication skills. And this is not I win, you lose kind of thing. But just communication skills in the world. This is a really good book.
I love it. Jason Yarusi, please tell the audience where they can go to find out more about you, the Live 100 mindset, and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, it's been a great talk here. So you can go over to Instagram, Jason Yarusi, Yarusi, or go to anywhere you find, podcast or YouTube, Live 100 with Jason Yarusi.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. I know you've heard this before. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? Overwhelm is real. I get overwhelmed every day in my business when I see the end goal and only focus on that and don't deconstruct it into the smaller steps. It can get really paralyzing. I will choose to sit on the sofa and watch poker or play poker online all day, sometimes instead of taking action, instead of taking action, just because I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to begin, so let's not begin anywhere. So I do really love Jason's approach here with the Live 100 mindset. I think it's an excellent reminder. And it's always good to hear people's viewpoints from different walks of life, different industries, and how they apply these methodologies to their success in their business. And he is definitely successful. So will you be applying this Live 100 mindset in whatever way suits you, fits you? What habits are serving you, are not serving you, or is your left brain tricking you into serving you? I have an interesting story, and this is crazy, but it's real. It happens all the time. Back in 2004, I was involved in a police shooting. I was a cop. I was not the other party. That was my previous career before I became a designer and then an interior design marketer. Who knows what I'll be next? Probably an astronaut. Give me a call, Elon. So I was in a shooting, and during the shooting, I was perfectly good to go, doing my job, tactical, resorting to training, done deal. Everybody would ask me after my shooting, "Hey, are you okay? Is everything?" I'm like, "Fine. What? I don't know what you're talking about. I did my job." Of course, it was upsetting. Nobody wants to be involved in a shooting, but it was only upsetting on a very conscious level, right? So I get my obligatory week off, because you do. After shooting, they investigate it and they want to make sure you're good to go. And then I go back to work like nothing. It's just the job I chose. This is my career. I went back to work and I did a traffic stop. And my subconscious body on that traffic stop failed me. It totally betrayed me. I was shaking. I was going up to the car, and I remember consciously thinking, what the is this? What is happening here? This doesn't make sense, because at the time, 2004, let me tell you something. I was a little Xena warrior princess. I was a super cop, flipping fences, foot chases, and all that stuff. I was relatively fearless with reason, for safety. And suddenly, doing a routine traffic stop, my body's like, how about no? How about we not do that again? Right? Even though the odds of me being safe in those circumstances with my training are pretty decent, I'd done it 1,000 times ahead of that without any of these issues. So long story short point, your body does some when you go through trauma, whether or not you even realize it is trauma. You're making decisions. And this is a really huge thing, right? We're not hopefully going to shoot too many people in our interior design business. But my point is, some of those small habits that you may have that are bad might be serving you to avoid situations where you had a bad experience in the first place. And that's something to dive a little bit deeper into, to have a come to Jesus moment and figure out why you're doing that, maybe before you start taking those little elephant bites. Just food for thought. The more you know. All right, guys, that is it for this week. Remember to tune in next week where we have another amazing guest. Who is it going to be? I don't know, but you're going to find out. And until next time, to get out there, get uncomfortable, and be great.
You've reached the end of this episode of Designed by Wingnut Social. But that's only the first step into accelerating your business the Wingnut way. Head over to wingnutsocial.com or call us at 786-206-4331 to see how we can help take your business from meh to amazing. We'll see you on the next episode of Designed by Wingnut Social, your digital marketing tightly fastened.